So hello and welcome to this NPTEL course entitled Trauma and Literature, where we're looking at Manto's short story, Toba takes Singh. We already had a lecture on this particular story, and we'll go on from where we left to the last point, the last lecture. So we talked about how the madness in this story is an example of biopolitical condition, because it is biological, it is medical, but at the same time it's quite political in quality as well. In the sense that there are these political parameters, these political events, especially the partition, which inform the whole experience of madness quite significantly. It affects madness in a way, which makes it even more confusing. So the cognitive confusion around the entire scenario, the entire spectacle over here, is because largely due to the political partition. And there is this absurdity, there is that irrationality about partition, which is quite pervasive, which is quite visible. And most importantly, we get to know, I mean, we saw in the last lecture that no one seems to have any clear idea about what the whole idea of India-Pakistan is. What's the need to have another country, and more importantly, what these two countries would do now that completely would declassify or take away all the earlier identities, the older identities of village, town, small places would just disappear. Right, so that becomes an important factor for us to understand as well. So among other things, the idea of partition can also be seen, can also be perceived as an experience of an event which unsettles identities, which destabilizes identities, and obviously it informs and accentuates the whole idea of madness, the whole experience of madness, which is the the overarching narrative in this particular story. So the asylum in Lahore, the lunatic asylum in Lahore, becomes a very symbolic site, because that's a site where madness gets depicted and played, but also that's also a site where some very fundamental questions about partition are asked in terms of what is the need for to have another country, where is India, where is Pakistan, and the more important questions will come later, where people will start asking where are their own villages, their old villages, their old towns. And there was certain the entire grand narrative about two nations. What that will do is it will completely do away with the local narratives, the local identity. So again, what we see over here is increasing loss of agency, an increasing loss of identity, where the local narratives, the local identities disappear and are consumed essentially by the grand narratives of nation formation. Okay, so and now we come to this point, this should be on the screen. One lunatic got so involved in this India-Pakistan question that he became even crazier. One day he climbed a tree and sat on one of the branches for 2 hours, lecturing without pause on the complex issues of partition. When the guards told him to come down, he climbed higher. When they tried to frighten him with threats, he replied, I'll live neither in India nor in Pakistan. I will live in this tree right here. With much difficulty, they eventually coaxed him down. When he reached the ground, he wept and embraced the Hindu and Sikh friends, distraught at the idea that they would have to leave him and go to India. Now, as funny as this particular act may appear to us, it's also very, very human and very tragic in many degrees. So you have this madman who doesn't want to go to India or Pakistan, and he climbs a tree, and he climbs higher when people threaten him. Obviously, that act of climbing the tree becomes, in a way, an act of asserting his agency in a very absurdist way. There's only method left to assert your agency, to act madly, to act in a way which is crazy, which is insane. And now, when it's brought down from the tree, when he's coaxed and he comes down from the tree, he comes and hugs his Hindu and Sikh friends in the asylum and weeping at the thought that he would never see them again because they were sent to India. Now, what this does in a very fundamental way is that obviously it talks about the emotional quality of partition, but how people who grew up together, people who stayed together, people who had villages together, had neighborhoods together, were suddenly told that in one fine day that they have to be sent to a different country depending on the religious identities. And as I mentioned earlier in my earlier lecture, that the religious identity becomes a grand narrative of identity. All the other identities, the linguistic identity, the food identity, the gastronomic identity, the cultural identity, all this will become secondary, and the religious identity will become the primary identity over here. So that becomes, interestingly, the grand narrative of identity formation, unfortunately, at the time of partition. So one man held an MS degree, Master of Science degree, and had been a radio engineer. He kept us apart from the other inmates and spent all his time walking silently up and down a particular footpath in the garden. After hearing about the exchange, however, he turned in his clothes and ran naked all over the grounds. So we're given different kinds of descriptions of how the mad people are taking or responding to the idea of partition. Some of those are funny, some of those are tragic, but there's also a very human quality, and there's also a very emotional quality about his responses. And we can see how the madmen over here can be seen as a microcosm of the population who have no idea and no access to the decision-making devices, decision-making offices, where things are just decided for them in terms of what should happen, where people should go, etc. Right? So this becomes a very sad situation. So the sadness, the tragedy of the story is quite palpable, despite the ostentatiously or superficially funny setting. There was one fat Muslim lunatic from Chiniot who had been an enthusiastic Muslim League activist. He used to wash 15 or 16 times a day, but abandoned the habit overnight. His name was Muhammad Ali. One day he announced that he was Qadi Azam, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So again, we can see how and during the time of madness like this, in the time of political unrest, all kinds of misappropriations take place. People attach themselves, people associate themselves with certain other identities. So we have a Muslim lunatic over here who was clearly mad because he used to wash himself 16 times a day, but he abandoned the habit overnight. And then suddenly, his name is Muhammad Ali, and when he gets to know that Muhammad Ali Jinnah is also the name of the person who would become the leader of Pakistan, he claimed that he was that same person, right? So one day he announced that he was the Qadi Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Seeing this, a Sikh lunatic declared himself to be Master Tara Singh, who was a Sikh leader during the time of partition, the time of national independence. Blood would have flowed, except that both were reclassified as dangerous lunatics and confined to separate quarters. So obviously it became very, very hostile when the Muslim lunatic declared himself to be Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and a Sikh declared himself to be Master Tara Singh. So we find that how people are trying to appropriate different kinds of identities. The Muslim lunatic wants to be Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a Sikh lunatic declares himself to be Master Tara Singh, and it becomes very hostile very quickly, and they're separated and declassified and reclassified as dangerous lunatics. Right? So we have different kinds of very, very strange responses to partition, as we can see. So the asylum over here becomes a very symbolic site. It becomes an affective site, as it were, where different kinds of affects play against each other, play with each other. Now we come to see another example of someone becoming melancholic or sad because of partition. There was also a young Hindu lawyer from Lahore who had gone mad over an unhappy love affair. He was distressed to hear that Amritsar was now in India because his beloved was a Hindu girl from that city. Although she had rejected him, he had not forgotten her after losing his mind. For this reason, he cursed the Muslim leaders who had split India into two parts, so that his beloved remained in India and it will become a Pakistani. So we have a Hindu lawyer here who was from Lahore, and whose beloved is now in Amritsar, and he gets to know Amritsar is now in India, so it's becoming very, very sad because he thinks, he won't be able to see her again because now she's in a different country, right? So, he's cursing the Muslim leaders for causing this partition because his beloved remained Indian when he became Pakistani. Now, when news of the exchange reached the madhouse, several lunatics tried to comfort the lawyer by telling him that he would be sent to India, where his beloved lived. But he didn't want to leave Lahore, fearing that his practice would not thrive in Amritsar. So you can look at the way in which different local and affective attachments are made over here. Right, so he's a practicing lawyer. He was a practicing lawyer, and based in Lahore. And when he's told that because it's Hindu, he'll not be sent to India, he very, very quickly announces that he doesn't want to go to India because if he loses his practice is thriving in Lahore, but he wants to stay in Lahore for that reason. So you can look at the very local, banal, immediate reasons that people have to stay in a particular place. And these are immediate identities, local identities, religious identities are taking away all these things, right? So as I mentioned, the whole idea of religion becomes a grand narrative over here, and that takes away all the other kinds of narratives, all the other kinds of practices, all the other kinds of associations. So the only association we're allowed to have over here is a religious association. Apart from that, all of the associations are becoming redundant, secondary. Okay. When news of the exchange was reached the madhouse, he was told, they were going to comfort the lawyer by telling him that he'd be sent to India because he's Indian, but he wants to stay back in Lahore because his practice thrives in Lahore. In the European world, there were two Anglo-Indians, Anglo-Indian lunatics. They were very worried to hear that the English had left after granting independence to India. In hushed tones, they spent hours discussing how this would affect the situation in the madhouse. Would the European world remain, or would it disappear? Would they be served English breakfast, or what would be forced to eat poisonous, bloody Indian chapatis instead of bread? So again, the local concerns become important, the funny concerns, where people are saying there are two Anglo-Indians over here in the world as well. And they are worried because now they get to know that India has become a free country and there are two different countries now. So they want to know what's going to happen to them, what is their status as identities. Would they get, will they continue to get bread, proper bread, or will they have to survive and suffer Indian chapatis? In other words, the chapati bread thing over here becomes a signifier of standard. Would the standard fall, or would they continue to have a privileged position in this asylum? Okay, now this is a point in the story where we get to know the character, the protagonist, who's the Toba takes Singh, Bishan Singh. The person becomes the symbolic response to partition. So one Sikh had been an inmate for 15 years. He spoke a strange language of his own, constantly repeating this nonsensical phrase, Upare Gurgu Annex de Bebhaya or Munkidal Latin. Now, this particular phrase will keep getting repeated. It roughly translates into that the quality of mung dal is getting deteriorated, is getting worse by the day, but the gods up there have no time to notice. The gods up there can hardly be bothered by the quality of the mung dal, which is getting worse, which is something which concerns them. So obviously it's a very absurd kind of phrase, but what it also means, if you sort of unpack it, what it also means is the monkey dal is a very local thing, is a very normal thing, eaten by normal people. So the complete detachment of the gods, the higher gods, the powerful gods, from the concerns of the low people, from the concerns of the normal people, that detachment becomes a symbolic detachment because it also reflects the detachment the governments have, the higher officers of the governments have compared to the people, the normal people, who have no access to the government, who have no agency apropos of the government. So the complete lack of agency, the complete lack of access is what is being suggested over here. The quality of mung dal eaten by the common man becomes the metaphor of common life, becomes the metaphor of common existence, and that's deteriorating by the day, that's worsening by the day. But the gods up there have no concern for that, and that becomes a recursive refrain in the story. He never slept. According to the guards, he hadn't slept a wink in 15 years. Occasionally, however, he would rest by propping himself against the wall. So he stood all the time. He never sat down, never slept, and he always stood. And sometimes he would rest by leaning against the wall. This happened for the last 15 years. His feet and ankles had become swollen from standing all the time, but as part of his physical problems, he refused to lie down and rest. So again, the body of this man becomes interesting. The feet and ankles have become swollen. It's almost like a symbolic swelling of time. A lot of time has got into him, and as a result, his anatomy is changing, his embodiment is changing. Right? You listen with great concentration whenever there was discussion of India, Pakistan, and a forthcoming lunatic exchange. Asked for his opinion, he would reply with greater seriousness, Upred Guld Annex or Dibaya Munkidal of India-Pakistan government. Now again, he would alternately blame the Pakistan government and the Indian government for the deterioration of the Munkidal, the quality of Munkidal, which becomes the metaphor again for the sustenance of the common man, because the common man would sustain themselves by eating Munkidal. And he would just respond whenever someone told him about the India-Pakistan partition, whenever someone mentioned anything about the ensuing violence and the confusion about it, he would just respond, would just refrain. That the monkey dal is deteriorating by the day, it's worsening by the day, so the governments have no care for that, no concern for that. So this madman's response, in a way, becomes a very symbolic response, because that is reflective of the government's callousness to the concerns of the common man. Right, so again, this brings us to the basic theme of the story, the inaccessibility of the common man to the higher governments, the complete lack of agency the common man have with the big, strong government officers who take decisions for them, right? Okay, later he replaced of the Pakistan government with the Toba takes Singh government. Now, Toba takes Singh in the story at this point becomes interesting, because that is the village from where he's from. So he now gets to know the words government. It's a new word for him. So initially he says India government, Pakistan government, but very quickly he replaces that with the Toba takes Singh government. That becomes important phrase for him. He also started asking the other inmates where Toba takes Singh was and to which country it belonged. but nobody knew whether it was in Pakistan or in India. And this becomes the geopolitical slash existential confusion in the story. This is where the geopolitics and existential issues meet and converge in the story, because no one seems to know what Toba Tek Singh is. I mean, no one knows how it has been reclassified. It's just a small village, and no one really cares where it's in India or Pakistan. So it's not really part of the grand cartography which has been formed by the partition. It's just a small village. So he keeps asking everyone where Toba Tek Singh is, and no one can give him a satisfactory response to it. So no one knew. When they argued, the question then only became more confused. After all, Sialkot had once been in India, but was now apparently in Pakistan. Who knew that Lahore, which is now in Pakistan, might not go over to India tomorrow, whether all of India might become Pakistan? And was there any guarantee that both Pakistan and India would not one day vanish altogether? So all kinds of absurd reactions, all kinds of absurd speculations are being spread and consumed. But what is important for us to understand here is to say that how these questions, these speculations, are actually no more absurd than the fundamental premise of partition, which is to break people on religious grounds. That becomes the most absurd thing in the first place. Now, the madman's responses are micro questions of absurdity, micro narratives of absurdity. But these micro narratives of absurdity are meant to be a response to the macro narrative of absurdity. Like, why was the need to break India and Pakistan in two different countries? Now, people are asking all kinds of questions. Where is Toba Tek Singh? How come Sialkot, which was in India, is now in Pakistan? How come Lahore, which is now in Pakistan, might not go to India? It might go to India. There's a guarantee the whole of India might become Pakistan. And the last speculation is, how about this possibility that both countries will just dissolve into something else, right? So what this means is, this is the formative phase of nation formation. So the nation at this point of time in people's imagination is very much a construct, right? It's not something which is always already there. It's something which is being formed. It is a very formative phase of nation formation. And this formative phase is important for us to understand, because what it means is people over here are acutely aware of the constructed quality of nation formation. They're acutely aware that this is being constructed, it's being engineered. And now when something has been engineered, then that obviously doesn't become very sacred or solemn or holy, because you can see it happening in front of you. It's a material process of becoming. Now, when that happens, obviously people are asking is, what about the other land masses? What about the cities? Would there be a permutation, combination going on with the cities as well? Would Sialkot become India? Would Amritsar become Pakistan? Would Lahore, which is now in Pakistan, will it become India at some point, right? How would the possibility of the whole of India become Pakistan? And who is to say if India and Pakistan together will not dissolve into something else? That is also perfectly possible. So all these mad speculations, what it means is, these also become the voices of the common man. So the madmen over here become the voices of the common man in terms of the agency that they exhibit because of the madness. They can get away by asking these questions because they're madmen. So that medicalization of the identity is, in a way, also sort of protection. It also protects them in a certain sense. Okay? So, and with this particular person, the protagonist, Toba Tek Singh of Singh, we find out all he's worried about, all he's concerned with is his own village, Toba Tek Singh. And the only thing he wants to know, the only thing he is interested in knowing is to ask, where is Toba Tek Singh? I mean, what happened to Toba Tek Singh? Where is that going to go? Okay, the Sikh lunatic's hair was unkempt and thin. Because he washed so rarely, his hair and beard had matted together, giving him a frightening appearance. But he was a harmless fellow. In 15 years, he had never fought with anyone, right? So he was a harmless madman. The attendants knew only that he owned land in Toba Tek Singh district. Having been a prosperous landlord, he suddenly lost his mind. So his relatives bound him with heavy chains and sent him to the madhouse. He comes from a feudal background. He was a landlord one point in time, and he's suddenly become mad. And now his relatives just chained him up and brought him to his asylum. His family used to visit him once a month. After making sure that he was in good health, they would go away again. These family visits continued for many years, but when they stopped when the India-Pakistan troubles began. So you can look at the way in which the partition trouble also affected or interrupted all the kinds of normal human movements. So the family would come to see him once in a while, but they would also stop coming because of the partition, because it was unsafe for people to go out in the streets randomly, because there could always be a religious mob, there could always be communal violence, and safety of people, especially women and children, would be at stake. So we have this normal daily domestic activities being interrupted, sometimes irreparably, by the partition. So, we are told that the people stopped visiting him because ever since the India-Pakistan troubles began. The lunatic's name was Bishan Singh, but everyone called him Toba Singh. Although he had very little sense of time, he seemed to know when his relatives were coming to visit. He would tell the officer in charge that his visit was impending. On that day, he would wash his body thoroughly with comb and oil his hair. They would put on his best clothes and go to meet his relatives. Now, again, we see this interesting example of common sense, sixth sense over here. So his rational mind has been destroyed completely by madness. He's no sense of reality, but for some reason he had a sixth sense, gut feeling that he would always know when his relatives would visit him, and he would prepare accordingly. He would sit and comb his hair and wash his clothes and put on his best clothes, take a bath, and wait for his visitors to come. And he would tell his guards that the visit is going to happen. The family is going to come and visit him on that day. If they ask him any question, he would either remain silent or say the same thing. Upa de Gurgu Annex Bebaya de Monkey Lantern. So he would continue to comment on the quality of monkey dal, which again becomes a sort of a sustenance figure. Okay. Bishan Singh had a 15-year-old daughter who grew by the finger's height every month. He didn't recognize her when she came to visit him. As a small child, she used to cry whenever she saw her father. She continued to cry now that she was older. When the partition problems began, Bishan Singh started asking the other lunatics about Toba Singh. Since he never got a satisfactory answer, his concern deepened day by day. Right. So we are told also that he had a daughter who'd come and visit him every month, but the daughter also stopped visiting, and with the partition troubles began. Now we're told that the daughter's visit is something very special to him, and as a small child she used to cry whenever she saw her father, and she continued to cry even when she grew older. And then, of course, the question about Toba Singh became more and more recursive. He never got a satisfactory answer. No one seemed to know where the geopolitical location of Toba Singh was, and his concern deepened day by day. So we'll stop at this point today. We'll find that how the partition, as I mentioned, is beginning to affect or had deeply affected normal daily activities, such as visiting family, eating normal food, asking fundamental questions. So even at a very micro level, at a very domestic, intimate level, the partition had been a big violence, a big act of violence. It enacted violence at the level of knowledge. Your knowledge of reality changed, your knowledge of, your realization of reality changed, your knowledge of your surroundings changed. And with that knowledge, with that change in knowledge, what also happened, obviously, was your sense of self also changed. And that's one of the fundamental concerns, one of the fundamental effects of trauma. Your sense of self changes because of something medical, but also because of other external reasons, emotional reasons. And we see this is a story, a very classic story, about how madness can be seen as a biopolitical violence on a human self. It's medical violence, of course, because the mind changes, but also it's political violence because of partition. Your sense of identity changes, your awareness of identity changes, and with that awareness, your realization of reality changes. The reality that once knew once upon a time will no longer be valid under the current circumstances. And everything around you, all the coordinates change, your family changes, your family values change, your children change, and the whole idea of partition obviously becomes a major event which brings to the halt, interrupts in a big way all sorts of identity, all sorts of embodiment. So we use the word embodiment in a very loaded way. Embodiment can be seen as a neural category, as a cerebral category, as a medical category, but also as a discursive category, something which is external. So there is this embedded quality of embodiment, there's also this extended quality of embodiment, and both get interrupted in different measures with the advent of partition. So we'll stop at this point today. We'll continue with this and hopefully finish the story in another couple of hours lecture. Thank you for your attention.